For speakers and communicators who want to do well, it's essential to connect with your audience. And my guest on this episode today is an expert at helping you develop strong and powerful connections with your audiences as a speaker. One of the main tools that he uses and teaches to do this is storytelling. And he has one heck of a background as an amazing coach and speaker and trainer himself. My guest is Danny Brassell. And you will hear Danny has a real passion for what he does and for who he helps, and a real excitement for talking about that as well. Danny talks about storytelling and the kinds of storytelling that can develop connection and increase sales, and one of the counterintuitive ways of telling stories that does deepen connection and rapport with your audiences. Now, if you are watching on YouTube, please do take a moment to like and subscribe, and maybe even click that bell notification for new content as it comes out on the channel. And if you're on a podcast app listening to this, make sure you give us a follow. You won't want to miss the guests and the solo episodes that we've got coming up for you. Welcome to Present Influence, the show for professional communicators who want to impact, influence, and inspire. My name is John Ball, and I'm your guide on this journey to mastery level communication skills. Danny, thank you for joining me and Present Influence. It's great to have you here today.
Thanks a lot for having me, John. I really appreciate you, and thanks for spreading some joy in the world. We need a lot more of you.
I've been trying to do exactly that. I did my first ever stand-up comedy night last week. I definitely got the bug for spreading more joy and laughter into the world from doing that. So let's see if we can do a bit more of it today. I've been excited to speak to you actually, because I speak to a lot of people on this show, but not everyone has the extensive experience and really the amazing amount of productivity that you seem to have had throughout your career. So just to give us a bit of an overview of that, tell us a little bit about how much speaking and writing experience you have.
If I was going to write an autobiography, it would be called Pivots, because I've gone all kinds of different directions. 30 years ago, I was a journalist. I got to cover President Bush Sr. in the 1992 presidential election. I loved being a journalist and got to meet every editor of every major daily. And one editor offered me a job working the City Beat for $16,500 a year. Then a friend told me that they were hiring teachers in South Central Los Angeles for $25,000 a year. So I became a teacher in 2005. My wife and I attended a real estate seminar, which turned out to be a scam, and we lost everything. I didn't want to declare bankruptcy, and my accountant said, you have to make this much more money this year than to avoid bankruptcy. And so I started speaking on the side and hit that number right on the number. Well, then in year 2, John, you get a much higher number. And I hit that number right on the number. In year 3, I thought maybe I should set a higher number. During one of the worst economic downturns in world history, I was able to build up a very lucrative speaking business, which was rolling along great. Then in 2020, COVID occurred and people said, how's business? Now it's great. How I just lost 200 speaking engagements last night because the world shut down. For years, people have been asking me to coach them. And I always resisted, because as a teacher, I've always had a very high standard. I actually will not let you fail. I'm going to be on you, holding you accountable until you succeed. I absolutely love it, because I'm working primarily with entrepreneurs, executives, and business owners who are highly motivated and they do the work. And so now I coach people on how to create engaging presentations that get the audience to take the next step with them.
You've delivered a lot of presentations over time, from what I understand.
I think on my latest biography, it's over 3,500 paid presentations. A friend asked me how many unpaid. I'm like, I probably did at least 1,000 unpaid before I did the 3,500 paid. So I've done quite a few with huge groups, with small groups, internationally and nationally, all men, all women, little kids, elderly, senior care facilities.
And you have a few books out, right?
I've got 19 books. So the last book I wrote, which I've actually now created a podcast for lazy readers who just want to listen to the book, is called Misfits and Crackpots. And most of these stories are of women, minorities, and international examples of people and companies that are doing extraordinary things, more contemporary. I had a lot of fun doing that. I'm in the process of writing 3 books right now. I love writing and love speaking. You can tell that. So
yeah, fantastic. Most of us have struggled to get 1 book done, let alone 19 and more to come. So that's pretty amazing. And I know that you mentioned that you have been coaching people and that's something you got moved into. What has become a main focus for you when you're doing that?
The most important thing, John, when I'm working with people is how do we get your audience to take the next step with you? A lot of people will say, oh, wow, you have a standing ovation and everybody thinks you're a great speaker. And that's all fine. And I think that's wonderful. But really, I only evaluate your performance based on how many people decide to continue working with you. So maybe that's an unpaid offer, like subscribe to my podcast or book a pre-phone. It could be a paid offer, like buy my product or invest in my coaching. And so when I'm working with clients, we look at numbers. Like numbers don't lie. For example, I was working with a financial planner. I have a company, the Wealth Story Workshop with Coach Jimmy Hayes, Nelson, and Dave Ward. I call us the professor, the performer, and the producer because I have the academic background. Coach Jimmy used to be on Broadway. He's the performer. And then Dave, he's our guy behind the scenes. It's our social media expert. And he's created this cool comic book of us and everything. When I'm working with people, we're always looking at how did we move the needle. We were working with Richard a few months ago, who's a very successful financial planner. And he used to start up his presentations. He'd say, I have 30 years in the industry. I've made over $1 billion for my clients. I've worked with this famous person or this famous person. I said, time out, Richard. What are the three most important elements of real estate? Location, location, location. It's all right for you to brag when you're doing it in the wrong part of your presentation. The most important part of your presentation is when you start, you have to connect with your audience by talking about your failures, not your successes. So we recrafted his talks, and now he starts his presentation. He talks about the very first client he booked 30 years ago. And it's this hilarious story, this comedy of errors. I can't believe anybody would invest a dime with this guy after he tells the story. But he said this, John, it was interesting because the way he gets clients is once or twice a week, he holds these seminars, these dinners at fancy steakhouses for about 15 couples in their 50s. And he's trying to get them to invest their money with him. And so it's always married couples. And you notice that before, the guy was always sitting there with his arms crossed, like, what's this guy trying to sell me? Out of the 15 couples, he booked about 6 phone calls for people interested. Now that we've changed the story, that same guy he noticed is now adding his knee because he's laughing so hard. And he's increased the number of phone calls from 6 to 12. We actually doubled his results. So your results may vary, but I thought that was great. But that's how we're measuring how effective his presentation is. So again, that's another long answer to your short question.
Was that mainly applicable to people who are selling products and services from the stage, or does this apply to people who may be doing more keynoting, who may be doing individual stuff, but may actually want to bring people to their world as well?
Yeah, it applies to anybody. So when I'm working with pastors, it's how many people can we get to tithe to your church, or how many people will convert to whatever you're preaching. When we're working with politicians, there's 2 different types of speeches for politicians. One is they're trying to raise money so that they can run. And the other one is, will you give me your vote? So those are 2 different types of presentations. This is a key element your audience has to understand. The biggest mistake I see in most presentations is people are asking for multiple offers. And I always tell people, choices confuse and cause you to lose. For example, right before I joined you, I was on another podcast. At the end of the podcast, the host said, if you like this podcast, make sure you like it, subscribe, and give us a 5-star review. And I told her, you just told your audience to do 3 things. They're not going to do any of them. You need to give them one single course of action. Choices confuse and cause you to lose. And so that's a perfect example. She just wants people to engage in her podcast. I'll work with keynote presenters and say, hey, one of my mentors was a guy named Zig Ziglar, and Zig, towards the end of his life, he did data from the 30 years he'd been speaking. And it was crazy because out of every 100 letters he got, only one person says he changed their life based on a speech. The other 99 were based on his products. It was like cassette tapes and books. When I'm working with people giving keynote presentations, I'm like, this is great. You can inspire people for an hour, but you need to stay connected with these people. So a lot of people, the way you do that, I'm like, give away a free offer, but get everybody's name and their email so you can stay in touch with these people and work with them again and again. My speaking career, one of the reasons it succeeded is I'm very persistent with people and I stay in touch with them. They're getting at least one contact a week from me. And I have people that had never hired me to speak that I had been emailing for 11 years that after year 11, they're like, oh, we want you to speak. It wasn't because I just sent them one email. It was because I sent them emails for 11 years and built up that relationship.
Yeah. I mean, that's a level of persistence with your CRM that most people would never stretch to. 11 years. Wow. but it's paid off in the longer term.
If it was easy, everybody would do it. Was that quote, entrepreneurship is living a few years of your life like most people won't, so you can live the rest of your life like most people can't. Muhammad Ali, when he used to train, he said, I hated every minute of training, but I thought to myself, suffer now and live the rest of my life as a champion. So that's the way I try to live my life. Be persistent, get the work done, give yourself options.
Yeah, it's certainly something that I've found that most people don't get as far as they want to in life because they don't feel like doing the stuff that will get them there. They don't feel like getting up early to go and work out. They don't feel like putting in the reps to rehearse their keynote presentation and all those kinds of things that get you to those higher levels. And that's really where the line is drawn between the winners and the not winners.
Yeah, most people, they want the result, but they won't do the work. I love, was it James Albury, the poem, he dined beneath the moon, he basked beneath the sun, he lived the life of going to do and died with nothing done. You know, it's good intentions. Or Gary Player, I'm a huge golf fan, and Gary Player has a perfect swing, and for his entire life, people have always said, oh, I wish I had a swing like you. And one day it just irritated him. He said, no, you don't. You don't want to hit 1,000 balls every morning until you're bleeding on your palms and you have to bandage them and hit another 1,000 balls every single day. You want my swing without doing it. But fortunately, the people I work with, I really don't like working with people that don't do the work because I get very annoyed if you're not succeeding. The reason you're not succeeding is because you're not doing the work. Fortunately, most of the people I work with are highly motivated and they'll do the work.
Do you ever make any moves to help motivate them, or you only work with them if they come to you highly motivated?
I'm pretty persistent. Yes, I'm annoying to people because I always tell them I'm your coach for life. Because I check in with I have one woman I've been working with for about 20 years. When she hired me 20 years ago, I had no interest in coaching people. And I said, I'll coach you for $500. 20 years later, I'm like, that's an investment on her part. I've been coaching her for 20 years. It only cost her $500. Cost my current clients much more than that. But I like to see how you're doing. I'm the same thing as a teacher. I'm always watching my students. I'm like, how do we get you up to that next level? Because fulfillment, I hate that term when I hear fulfillment, because for most companies, fulfillment means taking the cash of your customer and giving them a product. I like getting paid, but what's fulfilling to me is watching a person succeed beyond their own expectations. I'm very proud that a lot of the people I've worked with are far more successful than I am. That's what a good coach should do, guide them to extraordinary heights.
If we have a listener who is struggling with motivation at the moment, what would be your guidance for them?
If they're not doing anything, I'm going to be calling them and we're going to hop on a Zoom and I'm going to find out exactly why they aren't doing what they need to be doing. And we'll go step by step. Speaking is pretty easy. I always tell people there's two ways you get better at speaking. First of all, you got to watch lots of speakers. I watch at least 10 speakers a day. I watch them in front of big groups, in front of small groups, in front of men, in front of women, in front of international audiences, in front of national audiences. Here, I'll give you a ninja strategy I share with my clients. I watch a lot of televised award shows because when the person wins the Academy Award, they only have 45 seconds to connect with their audience. Most people waste their time. They get up there like, no one thank God, no one thank the guy. Stupid, nobody pays attention. But every now and then a person does an incredible job. A few years ago, there was a gentleman by the name of Joe Walker who won the Academy Award for Best Film Editing. This is Hollywood. The Academy Awards, all the important people are in the front of the audience, the actors. And you can tell nobody's paying attention. This is film editing. They're not even paying attention. When Joe Walker gets up there, he's British. He speaks very deliberately on stage. He says, a lot of people there are nervous, but when phrased properly, the term Academy Award nominee can be used as an insult. Well, now the camera sees the audience and you see the actors leaning in like, what's he talking about? And he says, for example, yesterday I got in an argument with my 17-year-old daughter and she said, well, Academy Award nominee Joe Walker. And all of a sudden you see everybody laughing hysterically. He gets off stage. Denzel Washington wants to meet him. Sandra Bullock wants to meet him. Brad Pitt wants to meet him. Time magazine said it was one of the highlights of the Academy Awards. That's the power of connecting with an audience. And that's why I'm watching speakers all the time. Like, what did they do to connect? So watch a lot of speakers to get better. The second thing is exactly what you and I are talking about. One of my mentors was a guy named Jim Rohn, and Jim used to say, you can't pay other people to do your push-ups. Translation, You got to do
Right.
the reps. I guarantee you, John, your very first podcast sucked. And the second one you did sucked.
It's pretty bad.
As bad as the first one. And now you've
Yeah.
done it so many times, you're very comfortable. Speaking is a trainable skill. People saying, oh, Danny, you're so natural on stage. I'm like, are you kidding me? I went to 18 different schools before I was 12 years old. Everybody used to make fun of me because I stuttered. Eventually, I went to school. A teacher worked with me one-on-one. She would sing things to me, and I found I could sing without my stutter. It's kind of like the movie The King's Speech. And eventually I lost my stutter and I became a swan. But the reason I got better is I've done the work. I've done lots of presentations. I was at a presentation once. This woman, she's like, oh, I can never do what you do. You're so quick. I said, time out. The question you asked me, I've been asked that question 500 times before. So before I gave you that perfect answer, I had 500 opportunities to grant that perfect answer. And that's how you get comfortable. And so that's what I always want to encourage people, but you got to do the work. People say, you know, I have no idea who I can speak to. Even the smallest towns have Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, Optimist clubs, Kiwanis clubs, schools, churches, temples, synagogues, chambers of commerce. I worked with a guy years ago, Jason, drove me nuts. Jason was 22. Oh, I don't know anybody. I have no following, Danny. I'm like, do you have a Facebook account? He said, yeah. Like, okay, we're going on right now. You're going to do your presentation on Facebook Live. And he was resistant. Well, no, we are going on right now. So we went on Facebook Live. Jason did his presentation for 45 minutes, and one woman from Ontario, Canada, accidentally tuned in and watched him, and he stopped. The next day, I didn't watch him, but I forced him. I said, hey, you got to tell me after you've done it day 2. So he went on again the next day. Like 3 people watched him. He's been doing that. I've never had a student like this. Jason has actually done this consistently. He gives the same speech every single day on Facebook Live. He's done it for 3 years. He now has 6,000 people in his community. And last year, he made almost $1 million based on the different offers he gave to that audience. And I always love to use him as an example because I'm so proud of him. Here was a guy that thought he couldn't do anything. He didn't have an audience. So I'm like, build your audience. You build this podcast. I'm sure you're not Joe Rogan. You don't have 100 million people listening to it yet. That's
not that I'm aware of. They're hiding if they are.
The word, John, is yes. These things take time. It doesn't happen overnight. And I love the fact that you're practicing because that moment that you're going to succeed, you're going to be a well-oiled machine at that point. You don't want to succeed right now. You're not ready yet. People are like, Danny, you haven't been on Oprah. I'm like, thank God I haven't been on Oprah. I'm not ready. I have friends that have been on Oprah that aren't millionaires. And I say, then you did it. Because if you go on Oprah, you should become a millionaire if you're doing it right. And that applies anywhere in the world. So that's what I would say to encourage people. Get off your butt and get out there speaking.
I think it's great encouragement. And I know that you already said a few times about how important it is to connect with your audience. And I know that one of the ways to do that is the way they craft their presentations and the storytelling elements. So for our audience, can you tell us a bit more about that?
Not a science. I had like my 7th grade speech teacher, Lynn Eskridge. She said, every good speech, you need a good introduction. Then you need to instruct your audience. Then you need to invite your audience to continue to do something with you. And then you need to end your presentation with inspiration. She called it the 4 I's. Jimmy and I, we call it the 5 C's because we got to be different. Everybody's got to be a little bit different, but it's the same strategy.
Sure.
So the 5 C's are clarity, connecting with your audience, teaching content, your call to action, and then your close. The most important at the beginning is your clarity, because there's 2 questions everybody needs to ask themselves before they deliver a presentation. Who is your audience, and what is the problem that you are solving? And you'd be amazed, John. I'd say probably 95% of the people I work with, a lot of those people are very successful entrepreneurs and business people, and they can't answer those 2 questions. They are very unclear on what they do and who they serve. You know, I'll work with people. I'm like, who do you serve? They're like, oh, everybody. I'm like, if you serve everybody, you serve nobody. Like, start with a niche. The riches are in the niches. What I would do if I were you is come up with a very specific statement of the problem I solve. And I would put an alert on my iPhone, and every single day I would practice that. So if you were to ask me, what is the problem I solve? I say, I empower leaders to transform their personal experiences into powerful business stories that inspire action, drive growth, and create lasting impact. I've practiced that so many times. It flows off like the Pledge of Allegiance or the Lord's Prayer. When you can do that, the reason you're practicing that, John, is so now when you're in the elevator and somebody talks to you, oh, I have this podcast, I work with professional communicators, and this is the problem I solve. You do that in 15 to 20 seconds. Most people can't do that. It's because they haven't practiced it. Most people actually do solve a problem, but they don't know how to articulate the problem that they solve. Most people waste time on social media on their phones. What I'm doing all the time is I'm setting reminders on things that I'm trying to learn. I read the book Dune, and they have a thing called the Litany Against Fear. And so every day at 9/11, I have an alert that goes, I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is their little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over and through me. And when the fear has passed, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has been, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. Every day at 12:20, I got married on December 20th. So every day at 12:20, I send my wife an I love you message. This is how I'm using my phone to help me develop every single day. Same thing if I'm practicing a speech, like 5 minutes every day. The book I'm writing right now has some things I want to remember. Every day I'm practicing for 5 minutes. I got to read this over so that I can just give these case studies with no problem. So that's how you'll get better at that. That's the clarity portion for all your presenters that are listening out there. And most presentations, the best presentations, they actually have a very specific framework. Now, I'm not going to say this is the only framework. When I lived in Spain and studied Picasso, at first I studied Picasso. I'm like, this guy's crazy. He's got Guernica. I didn't understand anything. But then I saw his paintings as a child. Like when he was 9 years old, he'd go into a room, look at that room, and then paint like a photograph of that room from memory. When I saw that, and then saw his later stuff, I realized he's at such a high level. I need to figure out how he got to that high level. Same thing with great presenters. Some people just focus on the basics. When you get really good, then you can start doing other things. After clarity, we talk about is connecting with your audience, teaching content. Connecting is the most important thing, because if you don't connect within the first 5 minutes of your talk, your audience is going to decide, am I going to just sit here and be present, or am I going to actually be engaged with this person? So Coach Jimmy calls it, you got to rap. And so the 3 gotta's for rap is you got to show you're relatable is the R for rap. Relatable means showing the audience that you're just like them. And the best way to do this, Brene Brown talks about vulnerability, and I completely agree with her. Stop talking about your successes, talk about your failures. Not everybody in your audience has succeeded, but they've all failed. And the more you talk about your own vulnerabilities, you're going to connect on a very human level with people. I always joke that I've never seen a presidential candidate who grew up middle class. They all grew up in a log cabin and they had to struggle. They're trying to relate to everybody. That's the relatability story. The A in rap is authority. You also have to show that you have the same problem they have, but you solve their problem. And so that's going to get their attention. Right. Oh, here's a person I can learn from. And then the P in the rap is your purpose. You got to show your purpose. Why does this matter? There's lots of research on this. Simon Sinek talks about in his book, Start With Why. He says that people want to be engaged in something with a purpose, with a bigger mission. Howard Schultz does that with Starbucks. It's not just about drinking coffee. It's about building communities around the world. Bill Gates, when he started Microsoft, said, I want a computer in every single home so that people can communicate around the world. Is big ideas. Connecting is the first part of your presentation. The content of your presentation is the longest part. Interestingly, it's the least important. Whatever you're teaching is by far the least important, because there's lots of research. The research shows that the bun's more important than the burger. People remember the beginning of your talk and the end of your talk. They don't remember anything in between. When you're teaching, what I think is really important is that you serve your audience, because they gave you their time. Whether they decide to take that next step with you or not, it's very important for integrity purposes that you help them. Like your podcast, every single episode I've heard of your podcast, there's helpful strategies that you're sharing that I'm like, okay, this was worth my time. I'm glad I listened to John today, because now I have an action item. And then the final 2 parts of your presentation or your call to action, your close. What Jimmy and I like to teach people is there's basically, we'll go back to Richard's example of having the married couple in his audience. You get 2 types of people in your audience. We'll be stereotypical. We call it the man and the woman. The man is usually the guy who I call Joe Friday. He wants just the facts. How much is this going to cost? How long is it going to take? What do I got to do? And it's very important that you talk about that in your call to action. Now, your call to action shouldn't be a very long call to action. It should be a very specific thing that you want your audience to do, very clear. But if you only communicate that, you're missing out on what we'll say is the wife, the woman in the audience, who I call Julia Roberts. Julia Roberts, what she's looking for is she wants to feel good. And this is very important because we know the human brain's weird. It doesn't focus on logic. It focuses on emotion. People make emotional decisions.
Yeah.
So the end of your presentation really has to end on a very emotional high. And if you can craft the presentation that meets the needs of both of those people, you're going to serve a lot more people and do a better job. I know with your audience, a lot of people are doing this, but they might not know why they do certain things. This is what I like to point out to people. This is why you're doing it. Some people just naturally get it. I don't know if Steve Jobs ever took a speaking class, but I love watching Steve Jobs, his old presentations. I'm like, man, his commencement speech at Stanford is like a perfectly crafted presentation. His product launches.
It was well rehearsed.
You just said it right there. He didn't do it off of memory. He practiced those things.
Yeah.
He knew exactly where to pause. It's fantastic. That's what I admire about him is he was a person that understood it takes a lot of reps.
Yeah, absolutely. And the closing stuff is really important. And not just for the emotional high that you leave people with, but it's the recency bias. It is the thing of people will remember what you said, but mostly how they felt. When you closed off, that's probably the thing that they will take with them most because that's what they're walking out with. Well,
that's right. I mean, and this is where I think Jimmy and I are a little bit different than a lot of people because I'm not going to put people down for this, but I see a lot of coaches and they coach people to speak. Most of the people I'm working with aren't speakers. These are people that just want to increase their business. So even when I'm working with speakers, I see so many people, they love to focus on the sad stories, this trauma. And there's 3 reasons why I refuse to do that. First of all, the world has survived a global pandemic. Everybody's had a lot of bad stuff happen. So I don't think we need to hear another sad story. I think we need more stories about it. Second of all, what Coach Jimmy and I are teaching our clients is what we call a well-crafted story. When I covered the president 30 years ago, it was his stump speech. This is a speech you deliver again and again to introduce yourself to new audiences. This is a speech you're going to deliver again and again. If you're telling a sad story, do you really want to tell that sad story again and again? Right. I see a guy, he talks about the murder of his daughter. I'm like, how do you talk about the worst day of your life 1,000 times a year? I have no idea how he does that. You gotta be stronger than me. And third, and this is where people get angry with me, I have one objective when I'm on stage. I want you to leave feeling better than when you came in. I want you smiling, laughing, happy. I think there's something admirable about that as an objective. I believe the people who tell the same sad story again and again, by the 20th time they tell it, now you're being manipulative. Those are crocodile tears. And I'm not saying it's not an effective sales technique. It's actually a very effective sales technique. But I personally don't want to have to take a shower after I speak because I just manipulated my audience. There's better ways, ethical ways to get your audience to want to work with you. And I'm not going to name it, but there's a lot of these sleazy people that they'll take every last dollar from you by working that violin story. And I just don't like it. I think we need a lot more. You were talking about it, John, like end on a high note because that recency bias. I want people feeling good and feeling like, hey, I can do this.
Yeah. As a speaker, you are, to some degree, the conductor of the audience's emotions throughout your presentation. You are leading the pack as to where they're going to go. If your goal is to make people cry, I would definitely be questioning that as to why do you want your audience to be crying? Why do you want them to feel bad if you're not actually trying to manipulate them? I think I would much rather have people smiling as they leave the room.
Yeah.
I know one of the things that my audience particularly love to hear about is storytelling. You've given us some great insight as to the kinds of stories we should be telling or the way we should be approaching that. But what are some of the things that really help us to deliver a good story?
An exercise I like to, I'll give this to the audience right now, is so sit down in a comfortable chair with a pen and paper for an hour, write down every story that's ever happened to you. I don't mean the entire story. I just mean triggers like time I locked myself out of the car in front of the grocery store. The time dad spilled mustard on his tie at that fancy restaurant. You'll find in like an hour, you'll come up with maybe 500 stories. So that's the first part of the exercise. The second part of the exercise is to think about, what's this story really about? Oh, this is a story about never giving up. This is a story about loyalty. This is a story about love. I know you're the same way, John, and the people in your audience are the same way. I literally have hundreds of files with probably tens of thousands of stories based on the emotion I want from my audience. For example, I was working with a gentleman the other day, fitness instructor. We were trying to come up with a powerful close for his presentation. And the action he wanted his audience to do, he runs all these gyms. He wants people to sign up for a gym membership because they can't do it on their own. And so the point he was trying to make is you have to hire an expert. I said, okay, good. This is good. Hire an expert. We need to hire an expert story that has nothing to do with what you do as a gym owner. And so I gave him an example. I was like, many years ago, my wife and I, we had tickets to the theater. We were dressed to the nines. And as we were driving to the theater, we got a flat tire. My wife said, I'm just going to call the tow truck. I'm like, you don't need to call a tow truck. I'm a man. I can fix a flat tire. So I opened up the trunk and I got the spare tire, the pumper thing, and the thing that's shaped like an X. And I was trying to change this tire for 27 minutes. And my wife's just shaking her head like she could have done so much better than me. And unbeknownst to me, she'd actually called the tow truck. And this 17-year-old kid shows up in the tow truck. And in 3 minutes flat, he changes the tire. I think there are times in life when all of us think we can do it on our own. But if you want to save a lot of time, save some money, and save a whole lot of headache and hassle, you hire an expert. And so what I've done with him is I'm showing him a story. This is going to get your audience thinking about the action that you want them to do, which is you're not telling them explicitly you should get a gym membership. You're giving them an example of a time that you struggled with something because you were trying to do it on your own and you realize you need somebody to help you out. You work with people like this. They understand it's not about just telling stories. The story has to have a point.
Helping them make the connections, right?
Absolutely.
You're helping us to get where you want to get to.
I was working with a woman and she's a very successful realtor and she's being difficult. She's like, I have no stories. I said, okay. First of all, you're lying. Everybody has stories. You just aren't thinking about them. Let's look at one of the most successful personal development books of all time, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. He shares no personal stories in that book. He interviewed all these millionaires and told their stories. That's another strategy. If you don't have an interesting story, tell somebody else's stories. That's what I'm doing in my books, like Misfits and Crackpots. I have this story. There's basically two women, Martha and Agnes. They're both choreographers. And they're having coffee at a diner. Agnes has just opened up her third play. Audiences like it, but the critics have panned it. So she wants to shut it down. And Martha's like, you can't do that, Agnes. It's not up to the critics to decide what's important. If you shut down this play, you're taking away that play from the universe. There's never been another you. There's never going to be another you. You can't do that. You have to put out what you have. And so Martha was Martha Graham, who is considered the mother of modern dance. She won the Kennedy Center Honors, the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Her friend that she encouraged was Agnes DeMille, who was the first woman to have 3 concurrent musical hits on Broadway. And she decided she would keep the play open, but she just changed the name to Oklahoma. All of us get that negative energy. One of my mentors, when I first started speaking, I had 500 people love the presentation and 3 people hated it and written me apart. He said something I'll never forget. He's like, Danny, 5% of your audience, they hate you. And they hated you before they ever met you. There are miserable people out there and you just can't let them get to you. There's also 5% of your audience thinks you're the Christ, that they're irrational too. The other 90%, they're rational human beings that you can actually affect. That really got to me. I thought about that. And I know I'm just like anybody else. I still let the negativity get in, but I try to get it out as quickly as possible. I'm not going to let critics get me down. Good storytellers have a point to every story that they tell. Steve Jobs, I watch him all the time. For a guy that wasn't a professional speaker, he uses storytelling in a way that everybody can learn from.
Yeah, there's some genius stuff in his stories that I do recommend everyone checking that stuff out. And storytelling, definitely a skill we can all do with getting better at and practicing more, whether it's our stories or other people's. What I do find a lot of, maybe you've seen this in the speaking world as well, of people perhaps using or overusing some of these sort of parabolic stories that maybe get used again and again by speakers. I think probably best to avoid those because everyone's heard the story of the Chinese farmer a million times and the stonemasons and all of that.
Oh, I actually used to belong to a secret group of speakers. And when we would encourage each other, that's what we'd always say is, oh, Did you tell the starfish story? $100 million. So yes, I'm right there with you, John. You just hit one of my biggest pet peeves. I mean, I'm okay. I'm not going to get the name of the gentleman. He's a billionaire. Everybody knows his name, but he was getting paid $150,000 for a 45-minute talk, in which half of his talk was commercials for his different brands, and the other half were 20 anecdotes that I can tell you I've heard 28 different times from different. It's all be nuts. I'm like, this guy's getting paid 150 grand to regurgitate these sad stories. Everybody has their own stories. And I'll say this also, because usually the best stories are the ones that all of us can relate to. I mean, I got this guy I'm working with. He's climbed the highest peak on all 7 continents. He swam with sharks in Madagascar. He's done the Iditarod and the North Pole. But nobody can relate to me. The stories that are the best are like the stories that everybody peed their pants in first grade. That's a good story. Everybody's gone to a dress-up party and they thought it was a dress-up, a party where they wore an outrageous costume and it was dress up like, oh, I'm supposed to wear a suit or a fancy dress. Like those are the stories that connect the best with audiences. You don't need to tell the stonemason stories. You hit them there. Absolutely right, man.
We see it all too often. I think your own stories are great, and if you don't have them right now, we should cultivate them. Do you have any advice for people on cultivating their own stories?
Yeah, absolutely. Take a tip, take a strategy from Jerry Seinfeld when he's writing jokes. It's observational humor. He's just looking at the craziness of society every day. Humans are insane creatures. Start paying attention to the things that are just silly that you see. Like I'll say like, oh, I was watching this horrible show last week. It was so depressing. It was called The News. That's going to get a laugh. I don't need to be a stand-up comedian. I just need people to smile like, oh, this person gets me. I can't stand the negativity out there. Like that person cut me off on the interstate and they said, I must be a good driver because they showed a finger saying I was number 1 with them. So how do you take those little things? I think it's the daily things that are going to really connect with your audiences. If I'm working with a person, that's what I'm telling them to focus on. In your industry, I work with lots of corporate people and there's so much corporate jargon. Scott Adams, the creator of the Dilbert comic strip, he was a genius with this. He makes fun of all this corporate jargon. His entire presentation is about corporate jargon, and people are laughing because they're dealing with it every single day. That's why I love the movie Office Space. All of us have that kind of annoying thing. And so that's why it's important, again, knowing who your audience is. Your audience is golfers, tell funny golf stories. If your audience are corporate attorneys, talk about silly corporate attorney stories. That's what's going to really connect with those people.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think the relatability aspect is super important. And for those who are working on the stories, you have something available for our audiences that can help them with that as well, right?
Well, as a thank you, John, to you and your audience for happening to listen to me, I wanted to give everybody their own storytelling blueprint. So if you go to freestoryguide.com, guide like a tour guide, I'll give everybody their own 5 C's storytelling blueprint. It takes you through the exact framework that Coach Jimmy and I take our clients through on how to create a well-crafted presentation. It takes the guesswork out of why am I doing this and why am I doing this now? Now you have the peace of mind that I know how to connect with my audience and most importantly, how to get them to take the next step with me. And you can get that at freestoryguide.com. And John, I just appreciate you. You're such a great listener. You let me go on and on. I've never met a microphone I didn't like, and I appreciate you. And I love what you're doing and believe in everything you're about, my friend.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you for coming and sharing your passion and your expertise with us today. I really appreciate it. And I know our listeners are going to enjoy that as well. And there will be links to go and check out Danny further in the show notes for anyone who wants to do that. Danny, thank you so much for coming and being my guest on Present Influence today.
Thank you, John.
Well done for making it to the end of the episode, first of all. And I hope you were able to pick out nuggets of value in there as well, because there's plenty. And do make sure that you go and download Danny's free story guide as well. I think you'll find it incredibly useful. But connecting with your audiences is not optional if you want to be a top quality speaker. So developing these skills is really critical. But maybe after hearing the episode, you might understand why I had a few challenges in editing this down. And believe me, it is a heavily edited episode. So what you heard was the after result of a lot of editing work. It's one of the reasons why I wasn't sure I was going to be able to bring you that episode this week, whether it was going to be editable enough for me to bring it down to a more digestible level that would still make sense as well and still have value for you to listen to. I hope that I achieved that. Maybe you can let me know if I didn't quite hit the mark. But I hope you'll come and join me again on Friday. We'll recap some of the key points of this episode and talking about maybe some additional things that might help you to develop deeper connections with your audiences, whether they are large or small. So make sure you stay tuned for that. If you're not already following the show, give us a follow. And wherever you're going, whatever you're doing, have an amazing rest of your day. See you next time.